Hi everybody, good evening. Welcome to the webinar. Welcome to Memorial Day. I hope for those of you who have served, you've had a good day, and for those of you who have those in your life that have served to protect this country, we want to say thank you to all of you for your sacrifice. So today we want to talk about change. Today we want to talk about what it means for a client to go through change. I think most importantly, the take home that I'll be talking about all night is that we see people go through a series of changes and it's hard to skip steps, right? I think we have an idea about how somebody needs to change, especially when it comes to our children and their problem behaviors. And Prochaska has this idea that people go through a natural series of steps. It's not always the same, it's not always perfect, but sometimes if our children or we skip a step, we don't really build a foundation. My therapist was just talking to me the other day. I share often that I've been seeing her for many years, for more than a decade and a half. And we talked about the fact that sometimes when you say something to a client when they're not ready, it helps them, well, it causes them to feel lost or not seen. And I asked her, I said, can you say things to me now you couldn't say 5 or 10 years ago? And she said, absolutely. So part of what we're trying to do is create a model, or share a model with you really, that helps you to understand where your child's at. Maybe it can give you some patience. One of the biggest predictors of satisfaction of any experience often is expectations going in. So this helps us to readjust our expectations. Let me talk a little bit about Prochaska's model and where it came from. You can go and Google this and find this just about anywhere. And this is really what we're going to be talking about tonight. Some history and context. It focuses on the decision making of the individual rather than on the outside environment. This is what's going on inside our children, inside us when we're making a change. This came from the death of his father due to alcoholism and where he saw his father and his process. And as he started to think about how do successful people change? How can we understand their change? And then match them. Because it doesn't matter how wise you are if you're not matching to where the client or the individual who needs change is at, you're going to miss them altogether. And they're going to feel, like I said, not seen. I just finished a 4-day intensive this weekend with a family. And when we were having our staff discussions, one of the discussions I was constantly having with, where are they at? Can I find them? It doesn't take any great talent as a parent or a teacher or a therapist to give somebody a lecture. Anybody can do that. We all can see things in other people that they're missing or things that they might benefit from knowing and learning. That's not a gift. That's not that impressive. That's not what therapy is. What therapy is, or what being helpful is finding the person and gently inviting, proposing ideas. They're just a step ahead or a step above, and honoring where they're at. That's when people feel seen. That's when people feel safe. That's when people don't feel shame or judgment. And so understanding that and watching that, learning about that tonight can help you. You can ask yourself, where am I in this process with a given issue? Where is my child in this process? It's a model for breaking bad habits, he said. Smoking, overeating, procrastinating, non-exercise, cancer screening, condom use, alcohol abuse, stress management, etc. Anything that we think of that could be dangerous, unhealthy, self-destructive, this is a model. This is his understanding as he observed people about how they go through the change process. It focuses on emotions, cognition, and behavior. So it doesn't just focus on one. Cognitive behavioral therapy tends to put its emphasis on the thought, right? Emotionally focused therapy tends to focus on the emotions. This model takes all into consideration. It's a developmental model. A developmental model, this is what it means when we say something is developmental. It means that it goes in steps, that each stage has to occur so that the foundation for the next stage is built, right? And we know that psychologically. If we skip a step, let's say we skip identity development, which we go through typically, we think of during adolescence from 12 to 25. If we skip identity development and we go to the next stage in the model of human development, which is coupling, right? Intimacy, finding a relationship. If we skip who we are, then we're going to be doing that in the context of coupling up. In other words, we're going to lose ourselves and our partner. That's why it's so important naturally for people to find out who they are before they start dating seriously. That's why when people get into recovery, they are encouraged to wait at least a year, because spending some time focusing on who you are, that foundation and that model helps to create an opportunity that the next stage is starting off right, starting off with all needs. So this is a developmental model. Honoring, slowing down, being patient. Again, as a therapist, my work is to try to find the client. Not to see what's missing and to tell them about it. That's not very impressive. It talks about it in terms of time and it adds a temporal dimension. So I'm going to go through Prochaska's stages in order. Talk about them and again, put them back together so that we can all benefit, become more helpful to the people in our lives who are going through the process. So pre-contemplation stage. This is somebody who's not considering change. That's where many of our students, our adolescent students begin with. Some of our young adults will enter during the pre-contemplation stage. Some enter into the next stage. They avoid the subject. There's ignorance there, right? They don't know what they don't know. They're not convinced that there's a need for change. They don't have a problem. Sometimes in marital therapy, somebody comes in during the contemplation or action stage for them while their partner is in pre-contemplation. And so as a therapist, it's trying to find and meet both of them. And understanding that it might not be a problem for somebody else. What it looks like is defensive, rationalizing, projecting, blaming, displacing. There's a hopelessness that comes. If there's been attempts to change in the past, there's a hopelessness that can be a part of this stage. And of course, an avoidance of looking at the issue. This right column is really important. Our response to it, to validate the lack of readiness. That's our task. I get it. You know, when students say to me, when they say, what's in it for me? Why would I change? I love that question. Sometimes I hear people react to that like they're very self-centered. Well, that's not a crazy question. Why should I change? What are the costs of the change? I'm not unhappy. That's a great place to honor and to look at and to explore. Through a series of discussions while we honor that, they might come to be open to the idea that while it's working in some areas, it's costing in some others. That can be a place that we go to, but be patient with the process. Avoiding the power struggle, clarifying that the decision isn't yours. In Al-Anon or the 12-step programs, they call it, this is a program of attraction, not promotion. You know, we're not trying to sell it to you. Now, putting your child in our program is to keep them safe. Putting your child in our program is to block off, to barricade their escape routes so that they have to deal with it because their symptoms are dangerous and chronic and are leading to dead ends. But part of the process that we get into right away is to say, you don't have to change. You can keep doing this, right? I can't make you. Surrendering that is one way to earn their trust, to not challenge the identity or the ego of it. Encourage them to explore, not action. One of the biggest mistakes that most people make in therapy, we call it flight to health, is they just want to change the behavior. They want to check off the boxes. They want to get through the program. I say this all the time. I said this on these webinars. I said this all the time to my students. I say this to the parents. Slow down. There's some wisdom in exploring where you're at and what are the conflicts. What are the issues? If you or anybody goes too quickly to the action stage, the risk is that it's not dealing with the root and that it's going to crop up later or somewhere else in life. So that's why when we're talking with somebody about substances, we're saying addiction isn't about the frequency or amount of drugs. That's one variable. But what's the disease? What's underneath? What's going on for your emotion? Eating disorders aren't about the lack of weight. I mean, that's the symptom. And these are threatening symptoms, dangerous symptoms. But what's underneath that? The self-worth, the image. What does that mean? What does it come from? What's that value about? Why do you value yourself that way? This is a time to provide information, to educate, inform, to model. This is what has worked for me. This is what I have found to be effective. Doesn't have to be your way. It might not work for you, but this is what I've found. This is not the time to just do it, not the time to just change behavior. Sometimes people will talk about faking it until you make it. I think that can come at a later stage that we'll talk about. The contemplation stage is ambivalent about change, right? Starting to consider it, but definitely weighing the pros and cons. And again, I'm going to go to the right column for just a second. Validate the lack of readiness. It makes sense that you don't want to change. I remember when I was in treatment when I was 17, the therapist said to me, the idea of giving up drugs is like losing your best friend, isn't it? I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that session. I don't remember every session that I had in therapy, but I remember that one because she hit it right on the head, and it felt so validating. And I started to consider my relationship with drugs in a way I hadn't before. Thinking about change, considering it, still procrastinating, right? There's the defenses are still there. And we notice them, and we acknowledge them, and we recognize them. We don't just go in toward behavior change, but we recognize them, spend some time. Defenses are something that we as therapists honor because they protect you. You come by them honestly. They make sense in a context. We can talk about, it's easy to talk about how they don't work, how they'll get into trouble. It takes therapeutic effort to honor them and to see how they do work and to be gentle with them and respectful of them. In this case, they're not considering change within the next month. Sometimes our students and clients, young adults, might be more likely to be in this stage of contemplation. They want guarantees. That happens all the time, right? Because they're weighing the risks, the loss of what it means to get rid of their symptoms. They want guarantees that it's going to go smoothly. When I was talking to a codependent client this week, where we were talking about the idea of telling the truth more. And the client was saying, but if I tell the truth to my husband about how I feel, he might leave. If I tell the truth to my husband about what I want, that might lead to divorce. So considering telling the truth is a risky proposition, right? And it becomes for the client something that they're weighing, that they have ambivalence about. Validating the lack of readiness, understanding and honoring the defense, like I said, clarifying the decision is theirs. That's still part of the same thing we just talked about. And encouraging evaluation of the pros and cons. Sometimes we'll have them do a pro and con list of getting rid of any behavior, which to many of us would look like, well, there's almost all pros to getting rid of illicit substance use. Look at the problem, right? Again, skipping these early steps is dangerous, although tempting. And we can promote and talk about the positive outcomes, but not perfect solutions. That's different than talk about this is what it can look like. We can create hope, right? And hope can lead to motivation. Preparation. They begin to test the waters. They begin to have some experience. We see this around week 3 or 4, typically. And there are variations, right? But 3 or 4, we might begin to see some sparks, where they've had some experience. Maybe because some of the letters that we've helped coach have sounded different. Some of the responses from their parents have sounded and felt different. And so they're thinking, this might all be working, might be doing something. One of my favorite things is when I do my phone calls with parents and children is for the children to experience that the parents are in it with them. And so they're not the only patient, if you will. And that gives them hope. And that it's complicated, and that everybody has questions and everybody struggles. So they begin to taste it, begin to feel it, begin to have some experience with success. They're beginning to think about acting within 1 month. They're planning that's about their readiness level. Within the next 4 weeks or so is when significant change is likely to happen if they're in the preparation stage. Identify and assist in problem solving, coming up with ideas, taking that pro and con list and talking about, what can we do, how can we help, identifying support socially. That happens in the group, obviously. We can start to talk about this. If this happens late in our program, we can start to talk about how Aftercare serves that. They start to develop skills, tools. That's not change. That's just the capacity to do something different or to practice something different. This could be a stage where they begin to fake it till they make it. However, it's also valuable because then they can have some experience with it, right? They can say, that felt good. That made a difference. Encourage small initial steps. I love it. It's the opposite instinct that most of us have with our clients or children. We want big steps, but encourage small steps can be helpful. Talk about the commitment to change. Make it a priority. Start to talk about where it fits in. Start to reprioritize it. Help them make an action plan so that they can be successful. But again, you're still in the preparation stage. Then comes the action. This goes somewhere between 3 and 6 months. It begins in wilderness. That's what we want to get them to this. That's what we hope for. They're taking steps to change. There's setbacks, there's regression, there's relapse, there's old behavior, but we have examples of new behavior, new insights, new awarenesses, a new way of thinking about themselves, an understanding of their old symptoms and how they fit, and these new skills and tools and how they meet their needs without the nasty side effects of the old symptoms. We, of course, talk about the environment and how we can change it, both with parents and at home. That's some of the letter writing and coaching we do. These are when the visits from parents often occurs during the action stage. These are when the phone calls begin to occur. So we're changing the environment, restructuring the family system. That's part of the environment. And we're talking about what aftercare looks like at this point. This is when we're starting to, as therapists, talk to you. So the first few weeks, getting into that stage of being ready to be prepared, then they get prepared, and then they start to take action, and then we can start to talk about aftercare and what's next. When they have setbacks, when they struggle, help them to advocate for themselves, help them to learn how to take care of themselves in this process. We don't need everything to be perfect in their environment. If it was, it would probably be so unrealistic so as not to support change. It's okay to have setbacks, to struggle, and begin to have experience that what I do makes a difference. The research in wellness therapy says this. The research says that our clients who come in with a low internal locus of control, they have an external locus of control, which means what happens to me defines my happiness. We see dramatic and clinically significant differences in their ability to internalize locus of control, which is what I do. It's what I do that makes the biggest difference. And that's what self-efficacy is all about. Help them deal with the feelings of loss and reiterate long-term benefits. There's going to be losses. There's going to be sacrifices. We have a letting go assignment that we have them do where they talk about what's the cost of letting go of my depression and getting healthy? What's the cost of stopping to abuse substances? What's the cost if I let go of my sexual objectification of myself in relationships? What am I going to lose? So they consider that. Again, you can hear in that the moving slow and looking at it in a very whole, complete way. The war story is the assignment that you often get week 3 or 4. It's an assignment that also is anchored in this idea. Write 2 stories, typically we'll say, that talk about something that was inappropriate or unhealthy back home, but talk about it like you're bragging. Like you're trying to sell me on it. Like after I read this, I want to hang out with you. If I'm a 17-year-old or a 22-year-old, I want to hang out with you on a Saturday night. I had one staff that say, this is like a Wednesday night war story. Can you get me like to a Friday night or Saturday night war story? That's what I really want. I wouldn't waste my Friday or Saturday night with this story. What we're trying to do is get them to look at what was so great, what attracted them to it, what needs it was meeting, because they're going to have to find new ways to meet those needs. Fostering healthy, helping them develop healthy responses to cope with challenges, to meet their needs in the way that the symptoms were, to reward and reinforce that, and then to help the family and help others to support them in the process. Sometimes they'll start communicating with their consultant. Sometimes they'll begin to have phone calls with schools or programs afterwards, depending on their age and their investment. And then there's the maintenance stage. This doesn't happen during wilderness, typically, although there are a lot of parents and students who will claim that we're in this stage. It's very rare. It would be unrealistic in Prochaska's model for anybody to get to this stage during wilderness therapy. We want to get to the action stage, but maintenance stage is something. That's why aftercare, therapeutic schools and program, intensive outpatient, even if they're coming home, that there are wraparound services, therapy, family therapy, psychiatry if they need it, mentors if they need it. Right? We're creating a support system. This is a time when it's important that the individual develop and hold on to a vigilance. That's why when you go into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, you say, "Hi, my name is Brad, I'm an alcoholic." Because what you're saying is, I have a certain vulnerability. If I'm not aware of my surroundings, I'm not aware of what I'm feeling, I can accidentally step into the same old hole. I have to be conscious of that. Just like somebody who's hypoglycemic needs to be aware of what they're eating. It's not a sentence, and when you do it well, it's an empowering feeling because I'm focusing on what I can control. Just like all of us, if you're aware of your issues, that's all it is, being aware of your issues, your weaknesses and your strengths even. Even in business, I'm aware of my strengths and my weaknesses. That's the most liberating thing I've experienced, is to be aware of those. I can delegate and have other people help me or do the things that I'm not very good at. I can focus on the things that I'm good at, that I love. So that's what the vigilance is about. It's about being aware of one's issues, strengths and weaknesses. Looking for social and environmental pressures. You know, they say in AA, change your playground, change your playmates. We often don't recommend that children at any age come directly home. That's the exception to the rule in our program, because the pressures are the same. And if you're not to the maintenance part yet, even if you're very early in the maintenance part, this is still one of the tasks. Review negative aspects of the problem. So continuing to remind and to work on, this is how it hurt me. Because there's going to be time, everybody's going to be tempted to go back to old behaviors. I remember what it felt like to cut. I remember what it felt like to shut down and not go to school, to get high, whatever it is. I remember that. Avoid negative context. Don't walk into a candy store while you're on a diet. Don't get yourself in situations where you're hungry and tired and stressed without good self-care. Avoid all of those contexts, those triggers as possible. And identifying them is an important part. Make a crisis response plan, a relapse prevention plan. Discuss coping with relapse. So many parents are uncomfortable with the discussion of relapse and the inevitability of it. Number one, it doesn't have to be a black or white, all or nothing grand relapse. Sometimes I've heard them described as flare-ups. So we all have flare-ups with our progress. Many of us have relapses with our progress and issues. With some things, it's more obvious. You know, with bulimia, there's behaviors that are black and white. With substance use disorder, there's behaviors that are black and white. Well, with codependency, it's a little bit more subtle. But if we're honest with ourselves, we can say, I definitely had a flare-up. I was just sharing at the intensive today that when I obsess about somebody else changing, the word obsess matters to me. When I feel that obsession, that focus, then I know I'm having a codependence flare-up, a relapse. Deal with loss and continue to create replacement activities, right? That's why we do the war story, because it got a need met. It met a need for you. So what are you going to do? That's why AA groups help to support and replace the culture, right? That's why exercise, mindfulness, we give those skills, give those experiences to our clients so that they can replace those. Toward the end of the intervention, if you will, or the treatment process, there's the termination. This is a point where it becomes a matter of life, where they're rarely tempted. You can recognize, like I said, regression and relapse, and it's not necessarily a discrete event, but more subtle. Aware of it, looking at that, recognizing that. Sometimes if it's a full-blown relapse, we reboot and get back into the action and maintenance stage more quickly. Regression and relapse are part of the process, but not an excuse. That's part of the discomfort that parents have with it. We're not saying it's an excuse. I relapse and regress in my own issues all the time. That's not an excuse. In fact, I'm more likely to beat myself up for it than anything. But if I can get rid of that shame and look at it, I'm less likely to be in denial about it, right? If there's less shame, I'm not going to need denial to cover it up. And I'm going to be able to address it earlier, to look at it, to be kind to myself, to work on it, to get help, to ask for help, to admit it to others. Learning from mistakes. I think that's the biggest thing about how serious the relapse is. Can you learn from it? And that's why it's important that it's not a shameful experience. Even in AA and NA, I have so many people tell me that have been in long-term recovery, there's so much shame for relapse, even in the program sometimes. Right? There's so much pride in collecting those chips, those 5-year, 10-year, 17-year chips. What if you've been clean and sober for 17 years and you relapse for 6 months and you start again and you have to go pick up your 30-day chip and your 60-day chip? That could be challenging to one's ego, right? If there's a lot of shame there. But can we learn from it? Can we be a part of the solution? And we're more likely to contribute that to be a learning experience when we as parents, as caregivers, don't shame, don't overreact, don't panic, and we get support. Evaluate the triggers, reassess the motivation, the barriers. It's kind of going back over some of the earlier phases. Plan for more coping strategies. Normalize really means to de-shame. That's what it means. It's more typically, de-shaming is my term, but that's really what it is. It's de-shaming the relapse. Normalizing makes it sound, I think to a lot of people, like we're almost condoning it, if you will. But we're not condoning or not condoning. We're just saying this is it. Budget more time and energy for change. We might need to identify some new pieces of support for the context. And, excuse me, identify the triggers, like I said, the red flags, and understand how to cope with them. So I'll bring it to the take-home. These are not always linear and discrete steps, but they are ways that we can understand the way that a human being thinks about and goes through the change process. It's not always the same for everybody. Avoid moving through too fast or skipping a stage. That's the developmental aspect of it. And as parents, if we can slow down, if we can have a perspective and understand and honor the stages and where they're at and match as best we can. I think about therapy, and I think about the same way in parenting is, like I said, you're trying to match where the person is at and encourage the exploration, the consideration of just the next step above. Just the next step. Much more likely to have success when doing it that way. And the idea that willingness is the beginning of the process of change. Sometimes we use it during a relapse. The letter of accountability, we kind of go through this. The letter of accountability, it's an exercise. It's an exercise to facilitate the preparation stage, right? This is what I've done. It's not an apology. It's not a promise to change. It's just, here's what I've done. That's the preparation stage. The purpose of the destructive behaviors is considering why I did what I did. What were the benefits of cutting? What were the benefits of sexual promiscuity? What were the benefits of lying? What were the benefits of being aggressive? They had benefits. And when I can understand those, I can understand the problem more deeply. The war story I already talked about, letting go I already talked about. And I love the impact letter. And the impact letter is a letter that they write to you. You write one to them early on, but they write to you. I think the impact letter is the most important assignment in our program. I think it tells me more about a client's accountability than the letter of accountability. Because I'm being asked to tell my parents, this is how you hurt me. This is what I felt when you did X, Y, and Z. And they're much more likely to slip in blame. You made me feel. You caused me to use. You made me run away. I had no choice. They're much more likely to slip into that. So learning how to tell somebody else how you feel and how they affected you without blame while still maintaining accountability, that's a much more subtle challenge, difficult challenge than the LOA. I think most students, not all, most students can write a pretty decent one pretty early on. Impact letters are much harder to write for our clients, for our students. So, all right, I'm happy to take any live questions on topic or off topic. My son has been out of wellness for 17 months and still in RTC. He is still telling war stories because he feels like his life has been boring and this makes him look exciting. Nothing is working to quell this, and actually, I think he's getting worse. His peers are ignoring him because he's lying us over the top. Any ideas to help him? He's obviously not following the trajectory temporally that we were talking about. I would go back to an earlier stage. I would treat him as if he was at an earlier stage, because that's where he's at. I don't know if he's regressed back there, because that's part of what you say, or I don't know if he never got. He might have skipped steps. This theory would tell us that he skipped some steps, that he didn't spend enough time in pre-contemplation and contemplation and preparation. That's what this theory would tell us. So then we go back there. We let go of our expectations, our ideas about where he should be, the norms around the timing of it, and we acknowledge where he's at, and we treat him like he's at that place. That's what this theory tells us to do. And I'm sorry, it's frustrating, but this theory is intended to offer you some comfort. Are there circumstances where forcing because of financial control is a newly turned 18-year-old with an only 4-month history of substance abuse to remain in aftercare after a vote for longer than he desires, just to be sure he is safe to come home, sometimes more harmful than good? Do you possibly let them come home even knowing that they may well relapse simply because they need to? So many of the co-clients in aftercare are over 21 and tell him he's too young to be really done with drugs. I'll start with that last sentence. Don't change this over, because there's so many things in this I want to talk about. That last part is the part that I call BS on. Lots of people get sober. I know many people who have never had a legal drink in their life who are in recovery. So that's just nonsense and noise and BS. He's either lying or exaggerating it, or his co-clients are idiots and they're full of crap. So that's just dismiss that part of it. You can't control it. So you're speaking to the idea of control. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you're asking some good questions in the sense that whatever you do, you're doing it because this is your boundary and what you feel best about. You may choose to let him come home and see if he can sink or swim. But ultimately, you're doing anything that you do with the sense of, I'm doing the best I can. I'm clear about who I am in this. I'm clear about who he is in this. I'm clear about my relationship to his addiction, his use. I didn't cause it. I can't control it. I can't cure it. I can't push all the right buttons. I can't flip all the right switches. This is not a magical equation for me to figure out. I'm going to be clear about my own recovery. I'm going to get into codependent treatment. I'm going to be clear about what I can and can't control. And I'm going to make decisions with integrity and authenticity and awareness. I had a client this week during the intensive where I was doing my last conversation. We were talking about a certain behavior, a certain thing. And at the end of it, I said, I'm not giving a recommendation. And she said something beautiful to me. She said, I didn't hear that you were. She said, I'm going to work on why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I said, I think that's beautiful. Much more important than you deciding right now what to do. So if I would apply the cycle to you, you're somewhere in the preparation stage. You're considering the pros and cons. I assume you may have read my book. Read my book. That's what it takes you through the right questions to answer. Going to Codependence Anonymous or Al-Anon takes you to a place where you can answer the question more effectively. Because if you make the decision with the idea that you making the right or the wrong decision will cause his relapse or his sobriety, you can't make a right decision. And if you make a decision with clarity and insight and authenticity and compassion, non-codependency, if you will, you can't make a wrong decision. That's the answer to the question. I'm sorry it's not more concrete and specific, but that's the truth. All right, Stephanie, I'm ready for the next one. And all the possible conclusions you have are in that equation. They're possibilities. My son is 4 weeks into the wilderness. What is the probability he should go back to college in September? Seems he should plan on at least a year off before reattempting college. That's the general idea, yes. Talk to your consultant, your therapist at Evoke for sure. But yeah, gosh, if we can just get out of our heads, our minds, this idea of this track, this plan that people are supposed to go on in their life. Most of the great accomplishments of the world were accomplished by people that didn't follow the traditional route. It's probably the exception to follow the traditional route. They did things early or late or sideways or backwards. So absolutely, Consider that. Talk to the professionals that are working directly with your son, but absolutely consider that. It's not bad news. It's good news. It means that he's going to be different and special and have something that other people don't. It's reprioritizing what's important and modeling that for him. It's saying to him that your mental health is more important than... I didn't start college until I was 21. I dropped out of high school. And then I got straight A's and a PhD. And I needed from 16, 17 to 21 to get my crap straight. And to this day, I'm still became one of the youngest owners and executive directors of Wilderness Therapy Program in my field. I caught up. I'm not the youngest anymore. My son is 4 weeks in the wilderness. What is the probability he should... Oh, that's the same question. All right. Thanks for the question. Thanks for the participation. The unofficial start of summer, and you're all on here. Thank you for being here. Here's our intensive and workshops. Our next Finding You one is in a couple of weeks. That's for any individual. Go to our intensive page, or you can contact admissions for more information. The workshops are 2-day experiential, multifamily group classes, wonderful education. We would like all families to go to these while their children are with us as possible. If you want deeper, more personal work, attend our Finding You or our Heroic Journeys. We're going to do an outdoor one. The two at the top are going to be done in a cabin in Park City. The one in August will be for families. Actually, I have to change that. I did that wrong. Sorry. Disregard the Oasis part there. I have to do something different than that. Sorry about that. Parent support group, Southern California, tomorrow night. See you there. Chicago on the 28th. New York City on June 12th. Contact Stephanie to RSVP for more information. Our young adult adventure trips, or for families, go to our website to find out more. We want all families to go to 6 12-step meetings while their children are with us. Please, please, please do that. They're free. And there's not much in this world that's so helpful that's free. Follow us on social media for announcements, inspirational stories, and pictures. The book is available in paperback or Audible version. Go to our Parent Alumni Foundation page to buy books that we recommend, but part of the charity goes to programs to help people pay for programs that they can't otherwise afford. All right, on Wednesday, so about 48 hours from now, 47 hours from now, I'm going to be doing the awareness wheel. Talking about that. It's a model that we use, a model that we borrowed. It's a wonderful model, understanding what goes on inside of all of us. So it's fantastic. I have time for one more question, Stephanie. You said one came up. Our son has been slow to go through the early phases of change at 8 weeks, and we're still not sure he's making progress. Should we be concerned? I don't think so. I think it's not completely unusual. While I don't like to say this often because it's scary to people, my son was in our program for double that time. He was slow to change. He was young. He was 13. Turned 14 while he was with us. But that's part of this idea, is where is he at? What stage is he at? Can we honor and stay with that? If we get impatient, we're going to want to move him on the stages, right? And he's going to feel not seen and heard and understood, and then it's going to be a power struggle. So I would practice letting go. This is when I have parents write letters to their child to say, I realize I can't change you. You're teaching me I have to let go. You're teaching me what I'm in control of. I'm going to go do my work, and I'm going to even focus less on how much progress you make. And that will have amazing impact on you and him. So that's even more reason to shift out of expectations, to let go of the outcome, to focus on you and not him, to pay less attention to the updates. And then to start to develop an aftercare plan that matches his resistance. Absolutely. Matches where he's at. That's part of what we do. How far can they get? What's their readiness level when they leave? Can we match that? What level of care do they need to match them? All right, that's it? Oh, when our child relapses after coming home and starts to blame us parents, in this model, does that put them back in pre-contemplation? Yes. Good question. Blame is just stupid. We all do it, but it's stupid. Just you listen to it and it just goes in one ear, out the other. You don't react to it. You don't defend. You don't argue. You don't debate. Right? If he's in pre-contemplation stage, you don't try to get him back into maintenance stage, right? You meet him, you use the tasks that are spelled out in the pre-contemplation stage. And the less his blame affects you, the less you feel the need to defend it, the more you see how just stuck he is and you have compassion, the sooner he'll stop doing it. Blame only continues when we react to it, and at some level, when we react to it. If we don't react to it, it's just boring. It has no use, no effect. Any more questions? I'm guessing no. All right. I'll see you Wednesday evening talking about the awareness wheel. Have a great couple of days and take care. Bye-bye.